Welcome, dear friends, to a journey into stillness. In a world that never stops talking, never stops demanding, never stops pulling at your attention, there exists a refuge so profound that it has sustained seekers for thousands of years. That refuge is silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. Today, we explore ancient Buddhist teachings and timeless Zen stories that guide us toward the quieting of the mind. These aren't just beautiful tales or philosophical concepts, they are practical pathways to the silence that exists beneath all the noise of thought, beneath all the turbulence of emotion, beneath all the chaos of modern life. The Buddha taught that most of our suffering comes from the endless churning of the mind, the constant stream of thoughts, judgments, worries, and desires that occupies our consciousness from the moment we wake until we finally fall asleep, and often even in our dreams. This mental noise exhausts us, distracts us from the present moment, and prevents us from experiencing the peace that is always available. But there is another way. Through these teachings and stories, we'll discover how to gently release our grip on thought, how to create space between ourselves and our mental activity, and how to rest in the natural silence of our true nature. Each story we'll explore today contains a key, a doorway into deeper understanding. Some will make you smile, others may puzzle you, a few might even frustrate you. This is intentional. Zen teachings often bypass the rational mind entirely, speaking directly to a deeper knowing within us. As we journey together through these teachings, I invite you to listen not just with your mind, but with your whole being. Let the stories wash over you. Don't worry about understanding everything immediately. Sometimes the deepest truths reveal themselves only in quiet reflection, days or even weeks after first hearing them. So, find a comfortable position, take a deep breath, and let us begin our dissolution into silence. Part 1. The nature of silence. Before we explore the stories, we must understand what silence truly is. Most people think silence is simply the absence of noise, but Buddhist teachings reveal something far more profound. There is a famous Zen saying, "The silence between two thoughts is the doorway to the infinite." What does this mean? Between each thought that arises in your mind, there is a gap, a space of pure awareness without content. Most people never notice these gaps because thoughts arise so rapidly, one after another, creating the illusion of continuous thinking. But the gaps are always there, and in those gaps exists perfect silence, perfect peace, perfect presence. The practice is not to stop thinking. This is impossible and unnecessary. The practice is to become aware of the silence that already exists between thoughts and to gradually expand our awareness to rest more and more in that silence rather than in the stream of thinking. The Buddha discovered this truth under the Bodhi tree. After years of extreme practices, he finally sat in simple meditation and observed his mind without trying to change it. He noticed that thoughts arose and passed away, feelings arose and passed away, sensations arose and passed away, but the awareness that witnessed all of this coming and going, that awareness was constant, unchanging, and inherently silent. This awareness is what Buddhists call Buddha nature, or original mind. It's not something you need to create or acquire. It's what you already are beneath all the mental activity. The journey is simply one of recognition and return. Let me share a story that illuminates this beautifully. A student came to a Zen master and said, "Master, my mind is never quiet. Thoughts arise constantly. I cannot find peace. Please teach me how to quiet my mind." The master replied, "Show me this mind that won't be quiet." The student sat silently, searching within himself for his mind. After a long while, he said, "I cannot find it. When I look for my mind, I cannot locate it." The master smiled. "There, I have quieted your mind for you." This story reveals a profound truth. The mind that seems so solid, so real, so problematic, when you actually look for it, you cannot find it. Thoughts appear and disappear like clouds in the sky. But where is the mind itself? It has no location, no substance, no fixed nature. When you search for the source of your thoughts, you discover only silence. Not a dead, empty silence, but a living, aware silence, the silence of pure consciousness itself. Another teaching comes from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. They speak of the nature of mind as being like the sky. Thoughts and emotions are like weather, sometimes sunny, sometimes stormy, sometimes calm. But the sky itself is never disturbed by the weather. Clouds don't damage the sky. Rain doesn't wet the sky. Thunder doesn't frighten the sky. Similarly, your true nature, your original silent awareness, is never actually disturbed by thoughts or emotions. They arise in you, move through you, and dissolve back into you, but you remain unchanged, like the sky. The practice, then, is to identify less with the weather and more with the sky, to recognize yourself as the spacious awareness in which all experience occurs, rather than the experiences themselves. This shift in identity is what the Buddha called awakening. It's not about achieving a special state or acquiring new knowledge. It's about recognizing what has always been true, that beneath all the mental noise, you are silence itself. Let's explore another story. A monk approached his teacher and asked, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" The teacher immediately struck him with his staff. The monk was shocked. "Why did you hit me?" The teacher replied, "You asked me to show you, so I showed you." This famous koan, the sound of one hand clapping, has confused and frustrated students for centuries. That's precisely its purpose. The rational mind cannot solve this riddle because it operates in dualities, two hands clapping, cause and effect, question and answer. But the question points beyond duality, to the silence before all opposites arise. What is the sound before two hands clap? What is the mind before thought divides reality into subject and object, self and other, noise and silence? The teacher's strike was not punishment, it was transmission, a direct pointing to the reality beyond conceptual thinking. In that moment of sudden shock, the student's mental chatter stopped. For just an instant, he experienced the silence before thought, the gap between stimulus and response. This is the purpose of many Zen methods, to create gaps in our habitual thinking, to interrupt the constant stream of mental activity, and to give us a direct taste of the silence beneath the noise. The Buddha taught many methods for accessing this silence. Meditation on the breath is perhaps the most fundamental. When you place your attention on the simple sensation of breathing, you're not trying to create silence. You're simply resting attention on something that exists in the present moment, which naturally quiets the mind's tendency to wander into past and future. The breath is always now. It's always silent at its core. Even the sound of breathing points back to the silence from which it emerges. By resting attention on the breath, you align yourself with the present moment, with simplicity, with the natural rhythm of life itself. And in that alignment, silence reveals itself, not as something created, but as something discovered. It was always there, patiently waiting, beneath the noise.
Part 2. The Empty Boat. 10 to 18. One of the most beloved Zen stories is called The Empty Boat, and it teaches us about the nature of reactivity and how we create our own disturbance. A monk was crossing a river in a small boat. As he drifted peacefully, watching the mist rise off the water, another boat suddenly collided with his, nearly capsizing him. Immediately, anger arose. The monk turned to shout at the careless boatman, but then he saw that the other boat was empty, having broken loose from its mooring and drifted into his path. Instantly, his anger vanished. He laughed at himself, secured the empty boat, and continued on his way in peace. Later, he reflected, "Why did my anger disappear when I saw the boat was empty? The collision was just as real. The disruption to my journey was just as significant. But because there was no person to blame, no target for my anger, the anger could not sustain itself." Then he realized, all boats are empty. Every person who bumps into us in life is carried by currents they don't fully control, currents of their own suffering, conditioning, fear, and confusion. They are empty boats drifting on the river of cause and effect. This teaching revolutionizes how we relate to conflict and disturbance in our lives. How much of our mental noise consists of narratives about what other people did to us, what they should have done instead, how wrong they were, how justified our anger is. These narratives create immense turbulence in the mind. They replay endlessly, gathering energy, creating stress and suffering. But the Buddha taught that this turbulence is optional. It arises not from the actual events of life, but from our interpretation of those events and our identification with those interpretations. When someone cuts you off in traffic, insults you, ignores you, or disappoints you, you have a choice. You can see them as an adversary to blame and resent, or you can see them as an empty boat, a person carried by forces they barely understand, doing the best they can with their level of consciousness, unintentionally colliding with you as they drift through their own life. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or accepting abuse. The Buddha taught clear boundaries and wise response to harm, but he also taught that we can respond wisely without adding mental suffering to the situation. When you see all boats as empty, your mind naturally quiets. The endless rehearsal of grievances stops. The compulsive need to mentally argue with reality dissolves. What remains is a clearer seeing of what actually is and a wiser response to it. This teaching connects to another profound Buddhist concept, dependent origination. The Buddha taught that nothing arises independently. Everything is the result of causes and conditions stretching back infinitely. The person who just insulted you didn't wake up this morning in a vacuum and spontaneously decide to be cruel. They are the product of their childhood, their wounds, their current circumstances, their level of spiritual development, the mood they're in, the stress they're under, and countless other factors. When you truly understand this, blame becomes impossible. Not because you're being especially generous or spiritual, but because you see clearly that everyone is doing what they must do given their current constellation of causes and conditions. There's no separate, freestanding agent to blame, only an empty boat drifting on the river of causality. This understanding brings tremendous peace. Your mind stops arguing with how things are. It stops trying to mentally rewrite the past or other people. You accept what is, and from that acceptance, wise action becomes possible. Let me share a related story. A farmer's horse ran away. His neighbor said, "What bad luck?" The farmer replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned, bringing with it 3 wild horses. The neighbor said, "What good luck?" The farmer replied, "Maybe." The following day, the farmer's son tried to ride one of the wild horses and broke his leg. The neighbor said, "What bad luck?" The farmer replied, "Maybe." The day after, military officers came to draft young men into war, but they passed over the farmer's son because of his broken leg. The neighbor said, "What good luck?" The farmer replied, "Maybe." This story illustrates what Buddhists call equanimity, the profound peace that comes from not immediately labeling everything as good or bad, lucky or unlucky. The farmer's mind remained quiet because he didn't jump to conclusions. He didn't invest in narratives about how things should or shouldn't be. The mind becomes noisy when it constantly judges, labels, and reacts to each event. This is terrible. This is wonderful. This shouldn't be happening. This is exactly what I wanted. With each judgment, mental activity increases. But when you can rest in maybe, in let's see, in simple presence with what is without immediately categorizing it, the mind naturally settles. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you respond to life from clarity rather than reactivity. The Buddha taught that equanimity is one of the 4 sublime states, along with loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy. Equanimity is the ground of the other 3, the balanced, spacious awareness that allows us to love without clinging, to feel compassion without being overwhelmed, and to celebrate others' happiness without comparison or envy. Equanimity is cultivated through practices like the empty boat contemplation. Throughout your day, when something disturbs you, pause and remind yourself, empty boat. The traffic jam is an empty boat. The rude clerk is an empty boat. The disappointing news is an empty boat. Even your own thoughts and emotions are empty boats, arising from causes and conditions, drifting through your awareness, passing away. When you relate to life this way, something miraculous happens. The volume of mental noise decreases dramatically. You find yourself dwelling in longer and longer periods of silence, not the silence of suppression or disconnection, but the silence of acceptance and presence. This brings us to another crucial teaching, the difference between pain and suffering. The Buddha famously said that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is what happens when life bumps into us, the collision of the boats. Suffering is the story we tell about the pain, the resistance we create, the mental noise we generate in reaction. When the empty boat bumps into you and you feel the physical sensation, that's pain. When you create a narrative about how wrong it is, how it shouldn't have happened, how you've been victimized, that's suffering. The pain might last a few moments, the suffering can last a lifetime.
There's a teaching attributed to the meditation master Ajahn Chah that beautifully illustrates another aspect of mental peace. He would hold up a glass and say, "I love this glass. It holds water perfectly, it catches the light beautifully, and to me, this glass is already broken." His students would look confused. The glass was clearly intact, sitting in his hand. What did he mean? He explained, "I know that one day the wind will knock it from the shelf, or my elbow will brush it off the table, or it will develop a crack. When that happens, I will say, of course. But because I know now that this glass is already broken, every moment I have with it is precious. Every moment is a gift." This teaching penetrates to the heart of why our minds are so noisy with worry, anxiety, and fear. We live in denial of impermanence. We know intellectually that everything changes, that nothing lasts, that everyone we love will die, that our own bodies are aging toward dissolution. But we don't live from that knowing. Instead, we live as if things should be permanent. We're shocked when relationships end, devastated when possessions break, traumatized when our bodies fail. Our minds fill with resistance. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. This isn't right. But the glass is already broken. The relationship will end, either through separation or death.
The body is already aging toward its end. Your current circumstance, no matter how wonderful or terrible, is already changing into something else. This isn't pessimistic or morbid. It's liberating. When you deeply accept impermanence, when you live from the knowing that everything is already broken, already passing, already dissolving, something profound happens. Your mind stops fighting reality. The constant low-level anxiety about losing what you have or not getting what you want begins to quiet. And paradoxically, you enjoy things more fully. When you know the glass is already broken, you marvel that it exists at all. You appreciate its clarity, its function, its beauty, not despite its fragility, but because of it. The same is true with relationships, with your own life, with each breath. Buddhist teachings speak of three characteristics of existence: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. All three point to the same truth from different angles. Everything is constantly changing, impermanence. Nothing can provide permanent satisfaction, unsatisfactoriness. There's no fixed permanent self to whom all this is happening, non-self. When you truly understand these three characteristics, the mind naturally releases its grip. What is there to cling to if everything is changing? What is there to chase if nothing can provide lasting satisfaction? Who is there to defend if there's no fixed self? Let me share another story that illuminates this. A student asked a Zen master, "How can I attain liberation?" The master asked, "Who is imprisoning you?" The student sat in stunned silence, searching for the prison and the jailer. He could find neither. In that moment of searching and not finding, he experienced a taste of the freedom he'd been seeking. The mind creates its own prison through clinging and aversion. We cling to pleasant experiences, wanting them to last forever. We resist unpleasant experiences, wanting them to end immediately. And we ignore neutral experiences, lost in thought about past and future. This constant clinging, resisting, and ignoring creates immense mental activity. The mind is always working, always strategizing, always trying to control the uncontrollable flow of experience. But when you recognize that the glass is already broken, that everything you're clinging to is already passing away, that everything you're resisting will eventually end on its own, that everything you're trying to control is actually unfolding according to vast networks of causality you can barely perceive. When you really get this, the compulsive mental activity begins to cease. What takes its place? Silence. Not the silence of giving up or depression, but the silence of acceptance and presence. You're still fully engaged with life, still responsive, still caring, but you're not mentally fighting with reality anymore. You're not generating constant noise in resistance to what is. There's a beautiful practice that comes from this teaching. Throughout your day, periodically remind yourself, this moment is already passing. This experience is already dissolving. This very breath is already becoming a memory. Don't say this with sadness, but with wonder and appreciation. When you're enjoying a meal, know that it's already ending. This makes each bite more precious. When you're with a loved one, know that this conversation is already passing. This makes your attention more complete, your presence more full. Even with difficult experiences, this practice brings peace. When you're in pain or facing a challenge, knowing that it's already passing, that this too shall pass, brings comfort and perspective. You don't need to fight so hard against something that's already dissolving on its own. The Buddha taught a meditation practice specifically to contemplate impermanence. You can practice it right now. Notice whatever is in your awareness right now: sounds, sensations, thoughts, emotions. Notice how each one arises fresh, exists for a moment, and passes away. The sound of a bird emerges from silence and dissolves back into silence. A sensation in your body arises and fades. A thought appears and vanishes. Everything is in constant flux. There's literally nothing in your experience right now that will be exactly the same 1 second from now. Even what seems stable, The chair you're sitting on, the room around you, is changing at the molecular level, aging, moving infinitesimally toward its dissolution. When you observe this directly, rather than just thinking about it, something in you relaxes. The mind that was frantically trying to make everything permanent, trying to control the flow of experience, trying to create security in an insecure world, that mind takes a breath and softens. A monk once asked a master, "What is the meaning of Bodhidharma coming from the West?" This is a classical Zen question, essentially asking, what is the fundamental truth of Buddhism? The master replied, "The cypress tree in the courtyard." This answer seems nonsensical until you understand what the master is pointing to. The cypress tree is just being a cypress tree. It's not trying to be something else. It's not resisting its nature. It's not clinging to past states or anxious about future states. It simply is what it is, moment by moment, changing with the seasons, eventually dying, all without complaint or resistance. This is the fundamental truth, to be what you are, accepting the nature of existence, flowing with change rather than fighting it. When you live this way, the mind becomes quiet, not because you've achieved anything, but because you've stopped resisting everything. The glass is already broken. The tree is already growing and dying. You are already changing, aging, moving toward your end. Can you be at peace with this? Can you let your mind rest in this truth rather than fighting it? When you can, a profound silence emerges, the silence of acceptance, the silence of being at peace with the nature of things.
There's a story about two monks traveling together who came to a river crossing. A young woman stood at the bank, unable to cross because the current was strong and she was afraid. The senior monk, without a word, lifted her onto his shoulders and carried her across. He set her down on the other side, and the two monks continued their journey. Hours passed in silence. Finally, the junior monk burst out, "Brother, how could you do that? We've taken vows not to touch women, yet you carried that woman on your shoulders." The senior monk replied calmly, "I put her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story reveals one of the primary ways the mind creates noise and disturbance, through rumination, through carrying the past into the present moment, through mentally reliving events over and over. The junior monk's mind was loud with judgment, with rules, with concepts about right and wrong. The senior monk's mind was quiet because he did what was needed in the moment, then released it completely. He carried the woman across the river, then put her down, both physically and mentally. How much mental noise in your life comes from carrying things you should have put down long ago? Past hurts, old arguments, previous mistakes, former versions of yourself, outdated beliefs about who you should be. The Buddha taught that one of the primary causes of suffering is clinging to the past. We replay conversations we wish had gone differently. We rehearse things we should have said. We ruminate on ways we were wronged or ways we wronged others. All of this is the mind carrying what should have been put down. The practice is simple but profound. Put it down. The event happened. The conversation ended. The relationship transformed. The mistake was made. All of that is past. What purpose does carrying it serve? Usually, we carry the past out of a misguided belief that ruminating will somehow resolve things or prevent future pain. But the opposite is true. Rumination doesn't resolve anything. It just replays the pain endlessly. And it doesn't prevent future mistakes. It keeps you trapped in the past rather than present enough to respond wisely to what's actually happening now. There's a meditation practice from this teaching. Sit quietly and notice what you're carrying. What thoughts keep returning? What stories keep replaying? What resentments keep resurfacing? What regrets keep echoing? For each one, imagine yourself setting it down, the way the monk set down the woman after crossing the river.
You might visualize it as putting down a heavy burden, or releasing a bird you've been gripping, or watching leaves float away on a stream. The mind will want to pick these things back up, that's its habit. But each time you notice yourself carrying what should be put down, you can practice releasing again. Eventually, the mind learns that it's safe to let go, that you don't need to carry the past in order to learn from it, that release doesn't mean denial or bypassing. This teaching connects to the Buddhist concept of skillful action. The senior monk's action was skillful. He helped someone who needed help. But he didn't cling to the action or to concepts about the action. He didn't carry pride about being helpful, nor did he carry concern about breaking rules. He simply acted, then released. Most of us are the opposite. We act, then we carry the action forever. We help someone and carry pride about it, or resentment if we're not thanked properly. We make a mistake and carry shame about it for years. We have a success and cling to the identity it created. We have a failure and cling to the story of victimhood. The Buddha taught a middle way between two extremes. One extreme is not caring about our actions at all, ethical recklessness. The other extreme is obsessing about our actions, clinging to them, carrying them endlessly, ethical perfectionism. The middle way is to act with care and wisdom, then release attachment to the action and its results. Do what seems right, then put it down. The results will unfold according to causes and conditions largely beyond your control anyway. This doesn't mean not learning from experience. The senior monk knew how to help someone cross a river because of past experience, but he wasn't burdened by that experience. He carried wisdom without carrying the weight of the past. There's a crucial distinction here: memory versus rumination. Memory is the natural retention of past experience, available as reference when needed. Rumination is the compulsive replay of past experience, creating suffering in the present. You need memory to function. You need to remember where you live, how to tie your shoes, who your friends are. But you don't need to ruminate about the argument you had last week or the embarrassing thing you said 5 years ago. The mind often confuses the two. It thinks that if you stop ruminating, you'll forget important lessons, or lose your identity, or fail to prevent future problems. But this is false. You can remember lessons without carrying the emotional burden of rumination. Here's another story that deepens this teaching. A student asked a Zen master, "How can I free my mind?" The master asked, "Who has bound it?" The student couldn't answer. After a long silence, the master continued, "If your mind was never bound, what is there to free?" This points to a profound truth. The mind binds itself through clinging and then seeks freedom from the very bondage it created. The junior monk bound his mind by clinging to rules and concepts. The senior monk's mind was free because he didn't cling. Your mind is naturally free, naturally silent, naturally at peace, but through the habit of clinging to identities, to stories, to judgments, to the past, to desired futures, you create the experience of bondage, and then you search for techniques to become free again. The paradox is that you're already free. You just keep picking up burdens and then complaining about their weight. The practice is recognizing when you're picking up burdens that aren't yours to carry. Throughout your day, notice when your mind returns to the past or leaps into the future. Notice when you're rehearsing conversations, replaying events, or imagining scenarios. Each time you notice, ask yourself the question from the story: who is binding my mind right now? The answer is always the same: you are. And if you're the one creating the bondage, you can also stop creating it. You can put down what you're carrying. This isn't always easy. Some burdens we've carried for so long that we've forgotten we're carrying them. They've become part of our identity. I'm someone who was betrayed. I'm someone who made a terrible mistake. I'm someone who can't trust. These identities feel real and solid, but they're just stories we keep telling, burdens we keep picking up. The Buddha taught that all suffering comes from clinging to pleasant experiences, wanting them to continue, to unpleasant experiences, creating resistance and resentment, and to neutral experiences, trying to make something happen, creating dissatisfaction with what is. The remedy is the practice of non-clinging, which is not the same as not caring. Non-clinging means engaging fully with life while holding it all lightly, the way the senior monk helped the woman while not carrying the action beyond its natural completion. When you practice this, you discover something remarkable. Life becomes more vivid, not less. When you're not burdened by carrying the past or anxious about controlling the future, you're actually more present for what's happening now. You hear sounds more clearly. You taste food more fully. You connect with people more deeply. The silence that emerges from putting down your burdens isn't empty or void. It's full of presence, full of awareness, full of life as it actually is, rather than as filtered through your stories about it.
A monk was meditating in a temple when it began to rain. A visitor asked, "Master, what are you thinking about while meditating?" The monk replied, "I am thinking about not thinking." "How do you think about not thinking?" asked the visitor. "Non-thinking," replied the monk. This exchange points to one of the most misunderstood aspects of meditation and the quieting of mind. Many people believe the goal is to stop thinking, to create a blank emptiness. But this is not only impossible, it misses the point entirely. Thinking is a natural function of the mind, like breathing is a natural function of the body. You wouldn't try to stop breathing, you'd suffocate. Similarly, trying to forcibly stop thinking creates tension and struggle, which is the opposite of the peace you're seeking. The monk's teaching about non-thinking points to a different relationship with thought. Not trying to think, not trying to not think, but simply allowing thought to be what it is, a natural arising and passing phenomenon, like the sound of rain. When rain falls on the temple roof, you don't need to make it rain. You also don't need to stop it from raining. You simply hear it. The rain comes, the rain goes. It's not you. It's not your responsibility. You're just the awareness in which the sound of rain appears. Thoughts are the same. They arise based on causes and conditions, your memories, your sensory input, your habitual patterns, your current concerns. They appear in your awareness like rain on the roof. You don't need to make them appear. You also don't need to make them stop. You simply observe them arising and passing. This is what the Buddha called mindfulness, the clear, non-judgmental observation of what is. When a thought arises, you note thinking. When it passes, you note its passing. You're not in the thought, lost in its story. You're not fighting the thought, trying to push it away. You're simply aware that thinking is happening. This awareness, this non-thinking, is the natural silence beneath all mental activity. It's not that thoughts stop, it's that you stop being identified with them. You recognize yourself as the awareness in which thoughts appear, rather than as the thoughts themselves. There's a beautiful practice from this teaching. Sit comfortably and imagine your mind as the sky. Thoughts are like clouds drifting through. Some clouds are white and fluffy, pleasant thoughts. Some are dark and heavy, difficult thoughts. Some are thin wisps, barely noticeable thoughts. Your job is not to make the clouds appear or disappear. Your job is simply to be the sky, spacious, allowing, unchanging despite whatever weather passes through. When you identify as the sky rather than as the clouds, you discover the silence that was always there. The clouds don't disturb the sky. Similarly, thoughts don't disturb your true nature. Only when you identify as the clouds, when you think you are your thoughts, do you experience turbulence. When you recognize yourself as the sky, there's peace regardless of what's arising.
Let me share another story. A student studying meditation became frustrated with his wandering mind. He went to his teacher and complained, "No matter how hard I try, my mind keeps thinking. I sit down to meditate and immediately thoughts appear about work, about family, about random memories. I feel like I'm failing." The teacher picked up a glass of muddy water from the table beside him. "See this water? It's full of sediment, stirred up and cloudy. What should we do to clear it?" The student thought for a moment. "We could filter it or add chemicals to settle the sediment, or—" The teacher interrupted him. "Or we could simply set it down and leave it alone." He placed the glass on the table. He said, "Watch." They sat in silence, observing the glass. Slowly, gradually, the sediment began to settle. The water became clearer and clearer without any effort or intervention. After a few minutes, the water was perfectly clear. "Your mind is like this water," the teacher explained. "The thoughts and mental activity are like the sediment. When you stir the water by trying to force your mind to be quiet, you just make it cloudier. But when you simply sit and observe without interference, the mind naturally settles. You don't make it settle, you allow it to settle." This teaching revolutionizes meditation practice. Most people approach meditation as a doing. I must quiet my mind, I must achieve peace, I must reach a special state. This very effort stirs up the sediment. But meditation is actually a non-doing, a simple resting in awareness, allowing the mind to be as it is. When you stop trying to control or fix or improve your experience, when you simply observe with patience and acceptance, the mind naturally settles into its inherent clarity. The sediment doesn't disappear, it's still there, settled at the bottom. Thoughts haven't been eliminated, they're still available when needed, but the water, your awareness, becomes clear and still. This is why the Buddha emphasized patience and gentleness in practice. You're not conquering your mind or wrestling it into submission. You're befriending it, understanding it, allowing it to reveal its natural state. There's a meditation instruction that captures this perfectly. Don't just do something, sit there. In a culture obsessed with doing, achieving, and improving, this instruction is radical. It suggests that the deepest transformation comes not from effort, but from allowing, not from striving, but from being. When you sit in meditation and thoughts arise, you don't need to do anything about them. You don't need to follow them, fight them, judge them, or analyze them. You simply note their presence, thinking, and return your attention to your chosen anchor, whether it's the breath, a mantra, or simple open awareness. Each time a thought pulls your attention away and you notice and return, you're not failing, you're succeeding. You're training the mind to recognize when it's been pulled into thought and to gently return to presence. This is the practice. Over time, something remarkable happens. The gaps between thoughts, those moments of pure awareness without mental content, become longer and more noticeable. You begin to rest in these gaps, to recognize them as your natural state. The silence that was always there, obscured by the constant stream of thinking, becomes apparent. And you realize, I am not my thoughts. I am the awareness in which thoughts appear. This realization is liberating beyond measure. If you're not your thoughts, then you're not defined by them. The worried thoughts don't make you an anxious person. The angry thoughts don't make you a bad person. The confused thoughts don't make you a stupid person. You're the awareness, clear, spacious, silent, in which all these thoughts temporarily appear and disappear, like rain falling on a temple roof.
There's a famous Zen story about a monk being chased by a tiger. He runs until he comes to the edge of a cliff. With the tiger behind him and the cliff before him, he notices a vine growing over the edge. He climbs over and begins descending the vine. Looking up, he sees the tiger glaring down at him.
Looking down, he sees another tiger waiting at the bottom. Then he notices two mice, one white, one black, gnawing at the vine he's clinging to. Just then, he sees a wild strawberry growing on the cliff face. He plucks it and eats it. How sweet it tasted. This story is often shared without explanation, allowing it to work on the listener at multiple levels. But let's explore some of its wisdom about quieting the mind and finding peace amid impossible circumstances. The monk's situation is clearly dire. Tiger above, tiger below, and the vine being slowly destroyed. These represent the impossibilities of existence, the past threatening behind us, the future threatening before us, and time itself, the black and white mice representing day and night constantly eating away at our life force. Most people in such a situation would be paralyzed by fear or frantically trying to solve the problem. Their minds would be screaming with panic, racing through options, overwhelmed by the impossibility of the situation. But the monk notices the strawberry, and more remarkably, he tastes it, really tastes it. How sweet it tasted. This simple statement contains profound teaching. The monk didn't deny his situation. He didn't pretend the tigers weren't there or that the vine wasn't being gnawed through. But he also didn't let the impossibility of his situation rob him of the sweetness available in the present moment. This is the essence of what Zen calls nothing special mind. Life is always happening in impossible circumstances. You're always caught between a past that can't be changed and a future that can't be controlled, with time constantly diminishing your life force. This is the human condition. Most people respond to this impossible situation with constant low-level anxiety, with desperate attempts to secure the future and control outcomes, with mental noise about what might happen or what has happened. But there's another option: to fully show up for the strawberry, to fully inhabit this present moment with whatever sweetness or bitterness it contains, to let the mind rest in what is rather than churning about what was or what might be. This doesn't mean ignoring real problems or not planning for the future. The monk climbing the vine was responding skillfully to his situation. He didn't just stand there and let the first tiger eat him, but within the constraints of reality, within what's actually possible in this moment, he found the strawberry and tasted it completely. The Buddha taught that mindfulness, clear, present awareness, is the key to this transformation. When you're mindful, you're not adding mental noise to experience. You're simply experiencing what's actually here. When you wash dishes mindfully, you're just washing dishes. The mind isn't complaining about dishes or planning tomorrow or replaying yesterday. It's here, with the warm water, the soap bubbles, the feeling of plates becoming clean. This is inherently peaceful. When you walk mindfully, you're just walking. The mind isn't racing ahead to the destination or dragging behind in the past. It's here, feeling each step, noticing the environment, alive to the simple miracle of walking. This seems almost too simple to be a spiritual practice, but the Buddha taught that simplicity is the point. The complex mind creates suffering. The simple mind, present, aware, and accepting, rests in natural peace. The tigers of past and future, the gnawing mice of time, these continue regardless of our mental state. But the strawberry is only available now, only tasted in presence, only sweet when the mind is quiet enough to notice it.
There's a story of a wealthy samurai who came to a Zen master and demanded to know the secret of inner peace. The master invited him for tea. As they sat, the master began preparing the tea with slow, deliberate movements. He carefully measured the tea leaves. He mindfully heated the water. He gently warmed the cup. Every gesture was precise, unhurried, completely present. The samurai grew impatient, his mind filled with noise.
Why is this taking so long? I came here for teaching, not to watch someone make tea. This is a waste of time. He should hurry up. Finally, the master handed him the tea. The samurai grabbed it quickly and drank it down, barely tasting it. Now, he said, tell me the secret of peace. The master smiled gently. I just showed you, but you were too busy thinking about the secret to notice it. This story reveals how the noisy mind misses the present moment completely. The teaching was happening the entire time, in each careful, mindful movement, in the complete presence the master brought to a simple activity. But the samurai couldn't receive it because his mind was full of expectations, judgments, and impatience. How often do we do this? We're so busy seeking peace that we miss the peace available in this simple moment. We're so focused on getting somewhere that we don't notice we're already here. We're so caught up in mental noise about what should be happening that we completely miss what is happening. The tea ceremony in Zen is not about tea. It's about bringing complete presence to each moment, each gesture, each breath. When you do this, the mind naturally quiets. There's no room for mental noise when you're fully engaged with the reality of now. This teaching extends to every activity in life. Washing dishes can be a tea ceremony. Walking to your car can be a tea ceremony. Eating your breakfast can be a tea ceremony. The form doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of presence you bring. There's a beautiful practice from this teaching. Choose one routine activity each day and do it as a tea ceremony. Maybe it's your morning shower. Maybe it's drinking your coffee. Maybe it's brushing your teeth. Whatever you choose, bring your complete attention to it. Notice every sensation, every movement, every detail. When your mind wanders to thoughts about the past or future, gently bring it back to the direct experience of this moment. You'll notice something remarkable. When you're fully present with the activity, your mind becomes quiet. Not because you've achieved anything, but because presence and mental noise cannot coexist. Where there is full attention, there is silence. Another story deepens this teaching. A student asked a master, "When you eat, do you just eat? When you walk, do you just walk?" "Yes," said the master. "But everyone does that," the student protested. The master shook his head. "When ordinary people eat, they think of 100 things. When they walk, their minds race everywhere. When I eat, I just eat. When I walk, I just walk. This is not ordinary at all." This points to the profound difference between being physically present and being mentally present. Your body is always here, always now. It cannot be anywhere else. But your mind can wander into 1,000 different times and places. The practice is bringing the mind home to where the body already is. This is what mindfulness means. Mind full of this moment, not scattered across past and future, not fragmented across imagination and memory. When mind and body are in the same place at the same time, there's an integration, a wholeness, a silence that needs no words. You're not divided against yourself. You're simply here, completely. The Buddha taught walking meditation as a formal practice. You walk slowly, noticing each sensation, the lifting of the foot, the moving forward, the placing down. Your attention is completely absorbed in the simple act of walking. At first, this feels strange or boring. The mind rebels. "This is ridiculous. I should be doing something important. This is a waste of time." But if you persist, you discover something amazing. Peace in simplicity, silence in singular focus, contentment in just walking. This carries over into daily life.
When you've trained in mindful walking, ordinary walking throughout your day becomes less noisy. You catch yourself lost in thought more quickly. You remember to come back to presence more readily. The same is true with mindful eating, mindful breathing, mindful listening. Any activity done with complete attention becomes a gateway to silence, a reminder of presence, an invitation home to now. There's another dimension to this teaching, the dropping of purpose. The samurai came to the tea ceremony with an agenda to get the secret of peace. This very agenda prevented him from receiving what was being offered. When you approach life with constant agendas, trying to get somewhere, become someone, achieve something, you create noise. The mind is always strategizing, evaluating, judging whether this moment is moving you towards your goals or away from them. But what if, just for this moment, you dropped all agendas? What if you weren't trying to get anywhere or become anyone? What if this moment wasn't a means to an end, but an end in itself? This is what the Zen tea ceremony teaches: complete engagement with what is, not as a path to something else, but as worthy of full attention in its own right. The tea is not drunk to get caffeine, or to be social, or to pass time. The tea is drunk as an act of complete presence, and that's enough. When you live this way, even briefly, the mind quiets dramatically. So much mental noise comes from treating every moment as instrumental, as a stepping stone to some future moment that will supposedly be better, more important, more worthy of your attention. But the Buddha taught that this future moment never actually arrives. When you get there, it's just another now, which you'll probably also treat as a stepping stone to yet another future moment. You can spend your entire life this way, never actually arriving, never actually being present, mind perpetually noisy with seeking. The alternative is to recognize that this moment, whatever it contains, is the only moment you'll ever have. Not as a depressing limitation, but as a liberating truth. If this is the only moment, then it deserves your full attention. And when it has your full attention, peace emerges naturally.
There's a teaching story about a student who achieved a profound meditation experience. He ran to his master, excited to share his breakthrough. "Master, I experienced such peace. My mind was completely silent. I felt one with everything. It was incredible." The master looked at him calmly. "That's nice. Now go wash your bowl." The student was deflated. Why wasn't the master more excited? Didn't he understand what a big deal this was? But the master understood something the student didn't yet. The biggest obstacle to peace is the seeking of peace. The biggest source of noise is talking about silence. The biggest burden is carrying around your spiritual achievements. This story teaches something subtle but crucial. Many people on spiritual paths create a new form of mental noise by becoming attached to their practices, their insights, their experiences. They carry these things around, identifying with them, creating new forms of ego around them. I'm someone who meditates daily. I'm someone who had a breakthrough. I'm someone who understands these teachings. These identities are more subtle than ordinary identifications, but they create noise just the same. The master's instruction, "Go wash your bowl," cuts through all of this. It says, don't make a big deal out of anything. Don't carry spiritual experiences as badges or burdens. Don't let even your insights become new forms of clinging. Just live simply, directly, ordinarily. The Buddha taught the middle way between two extremes. In the context of practice, one extreme is never practicing, never paying attention, living in complete unconsciousness. The other extreme is making practice into a new form of obsession, constantly evaluating your spiritual progress, turning the path into a competitive sport. The middle way is to practice diligently while holding it all lightly, to value silence while not making silence into a goal you're frantically chasing, to appreciate insights while not clinging to them as achievements, to benefit from teachings while not turning them into new forms of mental noise. Let me share another story that illuminates this. A monk bragged to his friend, "I can go days without eating or sleeping. I can endure any hardship in my practice." His friend replied, "The stone in the courtyard can do all of that too." This cuts through the ego that builds itself around spiritual practices. The point isn't to become stone-like, immune to human needs and feelings. The point is to be fully human while not being enslaved by reactivity. The quiet mind isn't achieved by suppressing everything human about yourself. It's achieved by accepting your humanness completely while not being defined by it. You feel emotions without being overwhelmed by them. You have thoughts without being controlled by them. You face challenges without collapsing into victim narratives about them. This is very different from the stone, which feels nothing, and it's very different from the unconscious person who is blown about by every passing feeling and thought. It's the middle way, fully alive, fully feeling, fully human, yet resting in the silence that contains it all. There's a practice from this teaching. Notice when you're turning your spiritual path into a new source of stress or identity. Notice when meditation becomes another thing you should do, another way you're failing, another source of self-judgment. When you catch this happening, come back to simplicity. Practice not to achieve anything, but simply to be present. Sit in meditation not to get enlightened, but simply to sit. Follow teachings not to become special, but simply because they bring clarity and peace. This lightness of approach paradoxically makes the practice much more effective. When you're not carrying the burden of spiritual achievement, you can actually be present for the practice itself. When you're not making silence into a goal, you can notice the silence that's already here. Another teaching comes from the Zen ox herding pictures, a series of images depicting the spiritual journey. The final image is not of someone sitting in deep meditation or radiating enlightened energy. It's an ordinary person going to the marketplace with open hands, helping where help is needed, living simply and kindly. The message, the end of the path, looks suspiciously like ordinary life. The difference is internal, not external. The enlightened person still chops wood and carries water, still experiences the ups and downs of life, still faces challenges and changes. But they face it all from silence rather than noise, from presence rather than distraction, from acceptance rather than resistance. They've come full circle, from ordinary unconscious living, through the extraordinary effort of practice and awakening, back to ordinary life, but now lived extraordinarily well. This teaching prevents a common misunderstanding that enlightenment means permanent bliss, never having problems, transcending the human condition. But the Buddha himself got sick, grew old, and died. Enlightenment doesn't exempt you from the realities of existence. What it does is free you from unnecessary suffering, the mental noise of resistance, the exhausting struggle against reality, the constant inner commentary that turns every experience into a problem or an achievement. The enlightened life is not problem-free. It's just free from the extra layer of suffering we usually add to our problems through our mental reactivity. A student once asked a master, "After enlightenment, do you still feel pain?" The master replied, "Yes, but I don't suffer over the pain. I feel it, I respond to it skillfully, and I let it be what it is without adding stories that make it worse." This is the practical benefit of all these teachings and practices. Not that life becomes perfect, but that you stop making it worse with mental noise. Not that challenges disappear, but that you face them from silence rather than panic. Not that you never think, but that you're no longer enslaved by thinking. As we come to the end of our journey together, let's return to where we began, the nature of silence and the possibility of a quiet mind. We've explored many teachings and stories, each one a doorway to the same fundamental truth. The mind's natural state is silence, not the dead silence of emptiness, but the living silence of clear awareness. This silence is always available, always present, always waiting beneath the noise of thought. You don't create this silence, you discover it. And you discover it not through achievement or effort, but through recognition and allowing. The empty boat reminds you to see all beings as carried by forces beyond their control, releasing the noise of blame and resentment. The broken glass teaches you to embrace impermanence, releasing the noise of clinging and denial. The monk who put down the woman shows you how to release the past, to stop carrying what has already been completed. The muddy water demonstrates that your mind settles naturally when you stop stirring it with effort and control. The strawberry amid the tigers reveals that peace is available now, in this moment, regardless of circumstances. The tea ceremony teaches complete presence in simple activities, finding the sacred in the ordinary. The washing of the bowl reminds you not to make spiritual practice into a new burden or achievement. Each teaching points to the same practice: let go, be present, allow, accept. These aren't passive actions, but active non-doings, the conscious choice to stop creating unnecessary noise and to rest in what already is. The Buddha's final words to his disciples were, "Strive on with diligence." This might seem contradictory after all we've said about non-doing and allowing, but there's no contradiction. The striving is not toward achieving a special state or becoming someone different. The striving is toward remembering, returning, recognizing. Each time your mind gets lost in thought and you notice and return to presence, that's the striving. Each time you catch yourself carrying what should be put down and you practice release, that's the striving. Each time you choose presence over mental noise, that's the striving. This path isn't about perfection. You won't reach a point where your mind never wanders, where difficult emotions never arise, where challenges never appear. Life continues to be life, sometimes strawberries, sometimes tigers, always the gnawing mice of time. But you can transform your relationship to all of it. You can learn to rest in the silence beneath the noise. You can cultivate the spacious awareness that allows all experience without being defined or disturbed by it. This is the invitation, not to escape life, but to meet it more fully, not to transcend your humanity, but to embrace it with wisdom and compassion, not to eliminate the mind, but to understand its nature and relate to it skillfully. The practices we've explored are not just concepts to think about, they're experiments to try, disciplines to practice, doorways to walk through. Take what resonates with you, leave what doesn't, but above all, practice. Sit in meditation regularly, even just a few minutes a day. Watch the muddy water settle. Notice the gaps between thoughts. Return to your breath, to presence, to the simple reality of now. Throughout your day, remember the teachings. When someone bumps into you, remember the empty boat. When you're clinging to something, remember the broken glass. When you're carrying resentment, remember the monk who put down the woman. When you're overwhelmed by circumstances, remember the strawberry. When you're rushing through life, remember the tea ceremony. These practices will gradually quiet your mind, not through force, but through understanding, not through suppression, but through insight. And one day you may discover what the ancient masters discovered, that the silence you've been seeking was never actually lost. It was always here, patiently waiting beneath the noise, like the blue sky that exists even when obscured by clouds. You are that silence. You are that awareness. You are that peace. Not something you need to achieve,
but something you only need to recognize and return to again and again, moment by moment, breath by breath. The journey to silence is paradoxical. You must make effort without forcing, practice without grasping, seek without chasing. You must care deeply about your practice while holding it all lightly. You must value peace while understanding that the very act of desperately seeking peace creates noise. This is the art of the middle way, walking the fine line between effort and ease, between discipline and surrender, between caring and letting go. It's learned through practice, through trial and error, through gradually developing the wisdom to know when to apply effort and when to release. Be patient with yourself. The patterns of mental noise have been developing for years, perhaps lifetimes, according to Buddhist teachings. They won't disappear overnight, but with consistent practice, with gentle persistence, with compassionate attention to your own mind, they will gradually quiet. Some days your mind will feel silent and clear. Other days it will be turbulent and noisy. Both are fine. Both are part of the practice. The goal is not to always have a quiet mind, but to develop a different relationship with your mind, whether quiet or noisy, so that you're not enslaved by it either way. Remember the sky and the weather. The sky doesn't try to control the weather. It allows clouds, storms, sunshine, rain, all of it moving through without resistance. You can be like the sky, allowing all mental weather to pass through without identifying with it or fighting against it. May you find your way to the silence within. May you taste the sweetness of presence. May you discover the peace that was never actually disturbed. May you walk gently through your days, aware and awake, resting in the vast silence that is your true nature. Thank you for walking this path with me. May all beings find peace. May all beings dissolve into silence. May all beings awaken to their true nature. And may you, right now, in this moment, notice the silence that exists between these words, the space that contains all sound, the awareness that witnesses all experience, the peace that requires nothing but your recognition to be present. This is not the end, but a beginning. Take these teachings into your life, practice them daily, return to them when you're lost in noise. Let them guide you home to silence again and again, until one day you realize you've always been home. You just forgot to notice. If these teachings resonated with you, please share them with someone who might benefit. Subscribe for more Buddhist wisdom and Zen stories. May you walk gently through your days. May your mind grow quieter with each breath. May you discover the silence that has always been your home. Peace be with you.